I wish that she would just die. Those were the words my husband Stephen said one late night when I came home from overtime work, thinking Stephen and our daughter Melissa were probably already asleep. I quietly entered the house, but they were still awake, laughing and talking in the living room. They didn't seem to notice I had come home, and I could hear their conversation all the way from the entrance. I hope she never comes home again. I had been working so hard for the sake of my family, and yet their words cut deep into my heart, making me question why I had been trying so hard all this time. But their conversation continued. They didn't seem to care where I was or what I was doing. All I could hear were harsh comments about me, and not a single word of gratitude like, "She's working hard for us." I felt torn between not wanting to hear more, but still being unable to stop listening to their words. But it was like tightening a noose around my own neck. Why was I working overtime? Why was I so exhausted, only to come home and still have to do housework? The more I listened, the more I felt lost. I had heard that when people are truly sad, they can't cry. And at that moment, I realized how true that was. I won't forgive them. My name is Kathleen, and I'm 45 years old. My husband Stephen is 3 years older than me, and we have a 17-year-old daughter named Melissa. The three of us live together. Stephen and I are a dual-income couple, making ends meet together, especially now with Melissa preparing for her university entrance exams. I've been taking on extra work and staying late at the office on purpose. She hopes to attend a private university, which is said to cost more than twice as much as a state university. In addition to our daily living expenses, we need to save up for her tuition, which has put constant pressure on our household finances. Despite that, she has a habit of wasting money, and it's been a major headache for me. She knows Stephen and I are working hard to pay for her education, but she still begs Stephen for money and spends it on whatever she wants. Stephen, too, spoils her by giving her allowances whenever she asks, and this often leads to arguments between us because I'm afraid we'll never save enough for her tuition. I wish Melissa could understand the struggles we're going through, but even if she does, she can't seem to control her spending. At this point, our family dynamic is like me versus Stephen and Melissa. I give Melissa a set allowance every month, but because it's not enough for her, she sees me as the enemy and Stephen, who hands her extra money, as her ally. One night, after a particularly long overtime shift, I came home exhausted. It was past 10 p.m., and I thought to myself that I had worked too late. I quietly opened the front door, thinking Melissa and Stephen might already be asleep, and I didn't want to wake them. At the entrance, I softly said, "I'm home," and slipped inside. It seemed they were still awake, talking in the living room, but what I overheard shattered my heart. I wish that she would just die. Yay, I hope she never comes home again. Stephen was joking that if I were gone, he could collect the insurance money and cover Melissa's tuition. Melissa, too, said she hoped I'd keep working forever and never come home again. I was on the verge of tears, wondering what all my efforts for the family had been for up until now. But their conversation continued. I didn't know if I wanted to keep listening or not, but I couldn't stop myself from eavesdropping on their words coming from the living room. "Man, I really want to remarry Betty." The sudden mention of a woman named Betty and the word remarry made me freeze. Stephen had the audacity to openly mention this Betty, so I realized Melissa must know who she was, too. I'd be all for it. I'm good friends with Betty, so I totally support you and her getting married, Dad. At that point, hearing them talk about insurance money had already pushed me to my limit. But the discovery of Stephen's affair with this woman named Betty was what finally broke me. I had heard that when people are truly sad, they can't cry, and I realized how true that was. Even with all the weight on my heart, I still hadn't shed a single tear. No matter how hard I worked for my family, Melissa's spending habits didn't change. She could talk about how it'd be fine to get the insurance money after I died, or say that she didn't care if I never came home again. And now, to top it all off, I discovered Stephen's infidelity. Without any real plan, I left the house and somehow found myself on a busy street. I raised my hand to hail a passing taxi. "It's a bit far," I said as a preface, before giving the driver the address of my parents' house. After an hour or so of driving, we reached the familiar neighborhood of my childhood home. I asked the driver to stop at a random spot nearby, paid the fare, and stood in front of my parents' house. I had called my parents from the taxi, telling them I was coming, so the porch light was already on. I wondered if I'd be able to explain everything to them properly as I took a few steps forward. With each step, I felt more and more weighed down with dread. I wanted to disappear to some far-off place where no one knew me. But just as I was lost in those thoughts, the front door opened, and my small-framed mom rushed out to embrace me. "It must have been so hard for you, Kathleen. Stay here as long as you need, okay?" At last, I felt my mother's warmth, and the tears I had held back finally began to fall. One after another, they streamed down my cheeks. After a while, my dad came out to join us, slowly stepping outside. "Kathleen, you can stay here as long as you want. What you need right now is rest. Take it easy for a while." "Mom, Dad, thank you. Thank you so much." I had never felt the warmth of my parents' love more deeply than in that moment, and at the same time, I made up my mind that I would never go back to that house again. Stephen and Melissa had shown me not even the slightest hint of love. Stephen had even talked about bringing a new wife into his life. Well, let him do as he pleases. Melissa's college plans, Stephen's affair, none of it mattered to me anymore. I buried my face in my mom's chest and cried my heart out. The next day, I called my office to request 3 days off. Even though I could commute from my parents' house, my eyes were swollen from crying too much the night before. Even after trying to cool them with a towel, the puffiness wouldn't go away. I also needed time to sort out my thoughts. Even with a husband and daughter like that, we had spent nearly 20 years together, so naturally, there was a sense of loss. While I was still in bed after calling my office, Stephen's name appeared on my phone. "Hey, Kathleen, where the hell are you, and what are you doing? The dishes are piling up in the kitchen. The laundry is the same. The floor is filthy too. The housework is falling behind, and it's becoming a problem." Not a word of concern about me, just complaints about the undone housework. He didn't care where I was or what I was doing, as long as I was getting the housework done. But I wasn't having it. I wasn't their convenient housekeeper anymore. "Stephen, I have a request." I spoke calmly, making sure not to lose control of my emotions. "I want a divorce." "Really? Funny you should say that. I was thinking the same thing. Let's get divorced." Stephen said he would take the day off, and we agreed to meet at the city hall at 11 a.m. With that, the call ended. Not long after, I received another call, this time from my office. The president of the company I'm working with on my current project wanted to speak with me urgently. I quickly jotted down the phone number they gave me and, after scribbling it on a piece of paper, I tapped the number and called them back. With my swollen eyes still stinging, I headed downstairs to inform my parents. "I'm going to get a divorce." "You've made that decision yourself, haven't you, Kathleen?" Mom gave me a concerned look. "Yes, luckily, Stephen agrees, so I'm going to go submit the paperwork now." "Go ahead, Kathleen. We'll respect your decision. Thank you, Dad. I left the house and headed to the station. It felt like ages since I had last walked this path. The house I had lived in with Stephen and Melissa was about 10 stations away by subway. I would take the same station to go to the city hall today. Lost in thought, I swayed with the subway ride and got off at the 10th stop, passing through the ticket gate. The exit led directly to the city hall, a completely different direction from the exit I normally use to go home. Inside the city hall, the lights were unusually bright. Stephen spotted me and waved, unnervingly cheerful. Kathleen, what a coincidence. Huh, I wanted to divorce you too. If we divorce, you won't be able to claim the insurance money, though. Huh, did you say something? Never mind. Let's get this over with. I'm giving you custody of Melissa. Stephen responded, "Yeah, leave it to me," and began filling out the necessary details on the divorce papers. I found myself thinking how much time and preparation goes into planning a wedding. Yet divorces are done in an instant, and just like that, our divorce was finalized, and I went back to using my maiden name. I'll come pick up my things tomorrow or the day after. I'll return the apartment keys then. Is that all right? Stephen, of course, agreed, and we went our separate ways. 2 days after the divorce was finalized, on the last day of the 3 days I had taken off, I visited the apartment where Stephen and Melissa now lived. I was supposed to come yesterday, but after everything with the divorce, I had been in a state of shock and couldn't muster the energy. I had planned to come when no one would be home, but for some reason, the door wasn't locked. Even though I wanted to avoid seeing anyone, it seemed like fate that I would bump into someone on a day like this. With a heavy sigh, I opened the door, only to find Stephen and Melissa standing in the entryway. "Kathleen, it's your fault Betty dumped me. What are you going to do about it?" The first time I had heard Betty's name was the night I returned to my parents' house instead of here. But actually, I had already heard her name again, this time directly from Betty herself, over the phone. Just as Melissa moved to stand by Stephen's side, trying to defend him, a voice called out, "Excuse me." It was Betty, dressed in a navy business suit, looking every bit like the image of a powerful woman. Betty. I had spoken to Betty 2 days earlier on the phone. At first, she had called my office, but upon learning I was on leave, she insisted on reaching me urgently, contacting me through my workplace. Betty was the CEO of a company I was currently working with on a project. She was also a business partner of Stephen's company, and Melissa worked part-time at her firm. In other words, Stephen, Melissa, and I were all connected to Betty. "Kathleen, as I mentioned when we spoke on the phone, I have nothing going on with Stephen. He's been approaching me, but I find it bothersome. We're already divorced, so whatever the two of you do is no longer my concern." "Oh, divorced, are you?" Betty had called me just before the divorce, informing me that Stephen was pursuing her, but that there was no mutual interest. "Yes, just a few hours after your call, I submitted the divorce paperwork at the city hall. So there's no need to worry about me anymore." I sighed as I explained, and Betty let out a sigh as well. The brief silence that followed was broken by Stephen's furious outburst. "Betty, are you betraying me and tattling to Kathleen? We're not even together anymore. There's no need to snitch." Stephen's rage was palpable. His eyes were bloodshot, and veins were bulging on his face. To be honest, it was terrifying. If Betty hadn't been there, I probably would have run away. Betty seemed to realize that this wasn't just an ordinary situation, and straightened her posture, responding to Stephen with a voice full of strength, as if she were drawing it from her core. "What do you mean by betrayal? There was nothing to betray in the first place. We were never in a romantic relationship. I was shocked to realize that Stephen had really just been spinning his wheels alone. When I spoke with Betty on the phone, I had my doubts, wondering, could it be true? But now, seeing Betty herself standing here, I was glad that the misunderstanding had been cleared up. Betty continued, "This morning, I called Stephen's company and reported your behavior as harassment. You've already been removed from any projects with my company. Depending on how you act from here on, we're prepared to end our business relationship with your company altogether." At this, Stephen collapsed to the ground on his knees. "No, Betty, don't say my name." Now Melissa, seemingly desperate to salvage Stephen's reputation, chimed in. "Betty, you'll at least recognize my work, right? You'll raise my hourly rate based on my performance, won't you? If that's what you want, start by watching your tone. Even if you're a student, when you're working, you need to speak respectfully. Being overly familiar and being approachable are two completely different things. If your attitude doesn't change, I'll fire you without hesitation." After Betty's reprimand, Melissa also collapsed to the floor. It seemed Stephen and Melissa were both in shock, realizing nothing was going their way. "Betty, is everything you said to them is true?" "It is. As I mentioned during our phone call, I don't have any romantic feelings for Stephen at all. By the way, what are you doing at the front door? Do you still have business at this house?" To Betty, it must have seemed strange for an ex-wife to be in her former husband's house. I explained to her that I had just come to collect my personal belongings. "Then I'll keep watch here for you. So go ahead and grab your things quickly," she said. Given what I had just seen from Stephen and Melissa, I knew that if I took my eyes off them for even a moment, I wouldn't know what they might do. Since I usually remained unflappable, I figured I could manage to keep an eye on them for a little while. Grateful for her offer, I quickly stuffed my precious belongings from the bedroom and living room into the bag I had brought and hurried back to the entrance. There, Stephen and Melissa were still slumped in defeat, with Betty standing in front of them, arms crossed, leaning against the shoe rack. "Sorry to keep you waiting, Betty." "All right, let's go." Betty had driven to the apartment and offered to take me to the station. On the way, she asked, "If you don't mind, would you tell me what happened?" So, little by little, I told her about everything that had happened to me. I also told her that, at one point, I had believed Stephen was having an affair with her, but I now knew from our phone conversation and today's events that it had all been in Stephen's head. As for Melissa, I apologized for not knowing that she had been so disrespectful toward her boss, even though I was aware that she worked part-time at Betty's company. "You don't need to apologize to me, Kathleen." Her tone was more soothing than scolding. "I'm single, so I don't really understand divorce or children. But if you're not happy with those two, staying with them is just a waste of your time." I realized that she might be right. Despite devoting myself to my husband and daughter, they had said things like how they could cover tuition with my life insurance, and that I didn't need to come back home. It made me want to give up. "Betty, you're quite an interesting person." "Oh, do you think so? Well, maybe it's fate that brought us together. Why don't we exchange contact information?" When we arrived at the station, Betty dropped me off and said, "If anything happens, be sure to reach out." With that, she drove off. Several weeks had passed since then. At first, after the divorce, I had felt empty and hollow, but living comfortably at my parents' house without having to worry about anything and not having to stay late at work anymore slowly brought the life back to my face. "It's good to see you looking like your old self again, Kathleen," Mom said, after finishing the homemade breakfast she prepared, and with her even making me a lunchbox. I left the house. while it used to take about 30 minutes to commute from my old apartment to work. Living at my parents' house meant the commute took about an hour. But considering I no longer had to cook for myself, I found that living with my parents was much easier. Since then, I hadn't seen Betty. Even when I called her, I couldn't get through, and I figured she must be busy. Thinking I might have better luck calling her on the weekend rather than a weekday, I returned home again today. However, waiting for me when I got home were my ex-husband, Stephen, and my daughter, Melissa, wondering what they could possibly want. I was surprised when both of them, in unison, pleaded, "Please, come back." I decided to hear each of them out in turn to understand what was going on. First, I started with Stephen. Despite being clearly rejected by Betty, he had persistently clung to her. "She is my woman. What's wrong with hanging around her?" That was Stephen's excuse. If Betty were here, I was sure she would have been furious hearing him say something like that. Besides, I couldn't see any basis for Stephen thinking she was his woman. It was all just in his head. And in reality, his advances were nothing but a nuisance to Betty. I was starting to feel sorry for Stephen's delusional mind. But because of Betty's scheming, I was removed from the project. And then I was demoted at work, he said. I already knew about him being removed from the project, having heard it from Betty weeks ago, but I hadn't heard anything about him being demoted. After my demotion, I couldn't stand all the people around me anymore. Whether they were gushing about their new marriages or grinning because they got praised at work, I couldn't stand any of them, so I took my revenge on every single one of them. While Stephen talked about revenge like it was something grand, I thought to myself, isn't that just harassment? Then the next thing Stephen said left me speechless. As a result, I got fired from the company. Fired. Normally, companies don't fire employees so easily, unless a company is struggling financially, which wasn't the case with Stephen's company. A firing like this had to be due to his excessive harassment. Betty rejected me, and the company abandoned me. Now I have no one but you. Please, Kathleen, let's get back together. I wished he wouldn't talk about me like I was some kind of shelter, but at least I understood Stephen's side of the story. Next, I turned to Melissa. "Melissa, why are you here?" My tone was sharper than usual. From her expression, I could tell she was here because she had done something wrong. Whenever Melissa had something bad to confess, her eyes would always dart nervously from side to side. Even now, she was doing just that, making it clear she was hiding something. Mom. I called Betty Mom at work, and the bosses got mad at me. Of course they did. If Stephen had married Betty, no one would have said anything, but she was single. It's only natural that people would be upset if a part-time employee suddenly started calling the company president Mom. And then, I kept following Betty around, asking, "Can I call you Mom?" Naturally, Betty rejected her. And since Melissa was neglecting her duties to chase Betty around, she got fired. On top of that, Melissa had been bragging at school about getting a rich mom, which turned out to be a lie, so her friends had distanced themselves from her. Because of this, she couldn't focus on her studies, and her chances of getting into her top choice university had dropped to near zero, a seriously bad situation. Finally, with Stephen now unemployed, even if she did manage to get in, there was no way they'd be able to afford tuition. I stepped back and looked at the two of them. What they had done to Betty was almost the same. Both had clung to her despite her obvious discomfort. One shouted, "She's my woman," while the other yelled, "She's my mom," and both had ended up getting fired. The power of genetics is frightening. Anyway, Kathleen, please, let's try again. Mom, please come back. Let's live together again, just the three of us, with Dad. Stephen and Melissa both bowed their heads to me at the same time. But I knew what they really wanted wasn't me. They needed me as a housekeeper or as a source of money, nothing more. I'm sorry, but I don't think I can be with you two anymore. Why not? Stephen immediately snapped back. I'm not your housekeeper, and I'm not your bank. I'm a person with my own will. And right now, my will isn't with you two. I want to prioritize myself over you. So what? You're saying you've forgotten about us in just a few short weeks? After nearly 20 years of living together, you've forgotten us just like that? Stephen's voice rose with anger, veins bulging in his forehead. I could feel myself shrinking under his rage. Whenever Stephen got like this, I felt terrified and found myself nodding to whatever demands he made. Last time, Betty had stepped in to help, but today there was no one to protect me. Would I have to nod my head and return to that apartment, enslaved to these two again? Kathleen. Just as Stephen called my name in a sharp tone, the front door opened and my dad stepped out. That's enough. Stephen, Melissa, you two have some nerve trying to force your selfish demands on Kathleen like this. Dad came out. Oh, Grandpa's here. Melissa immediately ran toward him. She probably thought she could get away with it because she's his granddaughter. Following Dad, Mom also stepped out of the front door. Grandma, it's been a while. From today, I'll be staying with you. I'm at your service. I furrowed my brow, wondering if Melissa was really going to be living with them. She was my own daughter, and it's not like I didn't love her, but her personality was far too much like Stephen's. Interacting with her often filled me with a sense of dread. Up until now, I'd always pushed myself, reminding myself that as her mother, I had to be strong. But I started to wonder if I could continue to convince myself of that in the future. Then I noticed Mom whispering something to Dad. What? For some reason, Dad was now staring intently at my face. Finally, he seemed to come to some sort of conclusion and said, "Got it." He moved to the garage, started the engine of a white car, and called out, "All three of you, get in." Dad took the driver's seat. Mom settled in the passenger seat, and Stephen, Melissa, and I got into the back. I felt my expression harden as I wondered where we were being taken. Could it be the apartment? But the car passed right by the apartment and kept going. I realized that we were on the road to Stephen's parents' house. Stephen seemed to come to the same conclusion and started pleading with Dad and Mom to stop the car. My dad and Mom are really strict. If they find out I got fired, I'm in deep trouble. Yay, and I like Mom's side of the family better than Dad's grandparents. Despite Stephen and Melissa's desperate pleas, Dad kept driving, ignoring them. Eventually, the car stopped in front of Stephen's parents' house. All right, all three of you, get out. Have you told them about the divorce yet? No, not yet. But could we turn around and head back to my apartment instead? Not happening. They'll help straighten out that crooked attitude of yours from scratch. Wait, me too. I'm their actual granddaughter. Can't I live with them? Melissa, you need some tough love, too. You'll be getting your attitude straightened out from the ground up. Understand? Melissa's eyes welled up with tears. Clearly not liking this one bit, but I felt the same. At this point, I didn't think I could live with either of them. Just then, Mom gently took my hand. It's all right, Kathleen. We won't make you do anything you don't want to. As we left the house, Mom told me that she had whispered to Dad, Kathleen seems reluctant to live with Melissa. Hearing this, I was on the verge of tears. A family that could understand me without words. It felt like such a precious and comforting place. Before long, Stephen's parents, Emily and Ronald, came outside, having heard the commotion in the yard. Stephen, Melissa, Kathleen, and even Kathleen's parents. What on earth is going on? Ronald asked, his voice sharp. Dad calmly explained everything. How Stephen had caused an unbelievable commotion and was fired from his job. And how Melissa, too, had created chaos at her part-time job, leading to her dismissal. He also added that Melissa was struggling with her friendships and that her study for college entrance exams had been greatly affected. I can't believe you're divorced. Stephen, why didn't you say a word to us? I've always told you to act with integrity, haven't I? Ronald was strict like this. That's why Melissa wanted to live with my parents, and why Stephen, rather than accept help from his own family, likely wanted to reconcile with me. Kathleen, I'm sorry. As Stephen's father, I deeply regret the trouble we've caused you. No, I should be the one apologizing for not handling things better. I bowed deeply to Ronald and Emily. I didn't dislike them, which made parting ways feel bittersweet. Mom, you're leaving me behind. As I got into my parents' car, Melissa cried out, Yes, you'll be staying here with Ronald and Emily. Focus on your studies. With just that, I turned my back on Stephen and Melissa, climbed into the back seat of the white car, and soon we were driving off. Not long after, Betty kindly made time in her busy schedule to meet with me. We arranged to meet at a cafe halfway between our workplaces. I ordered a royal milk tea and strawberry shortcake, while Betty opted for a cafe latte and fruit tart, and we carried our orders to the table. I heard that Stephen and Melissa caused you a lot of trouble. I'm sorry about that. I apologized to Betty immediately. Oh, Kathleen, it wasn't your fault. I came today as a friend, really. I do have something to tell you, but let's not dwell on Stephen and Melissa. All right, that really puts my mind at ease. Thank you. Without saying much more, we each peeled the film off our cakes and took a bite. The sweetness seemed to melt away the fatigue from work. First, about Stephen. Thanks to his parents' connections, he's now working at a small company nearby. Unfortunately, it's so small that there's no real chance of advancement for him. I could imagine him working there, probably feeling quite unmotivated. Stephen had his own ambitions, after all, and at his previous job, he had held a decent title. Still, I had no idea how Stephen was actually regarded at his workplace. He never brought work home, so I hadn't even heard him complain about his job. When I mentioned this to Betty, she looked like she was trying to recall distant memories. His work was neither particularly good nor bad. If he got promoted, it'd be congratulations. And if not, you'd just think, oh, that makes sense. So he was just an average worker. Why do you think Stephen started believing that you were his woman? I think it's because I defended him during a joint meeting. If I had to guess, that's the only connection between us. So Stephen must have thought you were his woman, and that he'd eventually marry you. Which is why Melissa started calling you Mom. That's what it seems like. I've never seen a father and daughter so wrapped up in their own delusions before. Kathleen, you've done well to manage all this. With her prompting, I opened up honestly to Betty. Stephen was a stranger to me to begin with, so once the divorce was finalized, that was that. I don't regret the divorce anymore. But with Melissa, I can't help feeling that maybe I could have done more for her. After graduating from high school, Melissa was unable to get into her first-choice university. Instead, she was accepted into her second-choice university, which I heard is close to her grandparents' house, so she began commuting there and started her college life. Aren't her grandparents quite strict? Yes, very much so. Then I think it will be her grandparents and society, rather than Stephen, who will raise her. Don't be too hard on yourself. Just visit her when you feel like it. Her words were a comfort to me. They reassured me that I didn't have to force myself or rush things. Feeling a sense of peace, I enjoyed mighty time with Betty. Not long after, the project Betty and I had been working on became a huge success. I, who had never been on the path to promotion, suddenly found myself on the fast track thanks to this success. I don't think I'm cut out for the promotion track, I confided over the phone, feeling a bit unsure of myself. But Betty quickly reassured me. You'll be fine, Kathleen. You're thorough in your work, and you're easy to collaborate with. Have more confidence in yourself. Through the strange connection that Stephen and Melissa brought into our lives, Betty and I have become close friends. I cherish this bond, and now feel determined to live fulfilling days, both in my work and in my personal life.
Phew, it's finally over. That took forever. Let's get out of here. Graham, Kyle, now that your dad is gone too, I don't have to take care of you two anymore, right? Right after the funeral for my son Lance, his wife Patricia blurted out those unbelievable words. What could have possibly possessed her to say something like that? How could she say such a terrible thing to the twins, Graham and Kyle, who are drowning in grief over losing their father? You're the only parent these children have left now. Think about it. Huh? I'm remarrying a handsome doctor. The old hag can raise those twin brats. See ya. While I stood there in shock, Patricia selfishly spat out those lines and breezily walked away. The other attendees and I were stunned by this sudden turn of events. It's fine. After Patricia left, I muttered under my breath, I'll take responsibility for them. The chaotic funeral finally over, I returned home and collapsed into bed with a deep sigh. I was utterly exhausted, the day feeling longer than ever before. My eyelids grew heavy on their own. At 2 o'clock, I was awoken by strange laughter coming from the next room. When I opened the door, there were two faces illuminated by the pale blue glow of a computer screen in the darkness. There were Graham and Kyle, who should have been consumed by sorrow, laughing as they looked at the computer. I'm Felicity. Ever since I lost my beloved husband 3 years ago, I've been living alone in this house. The one joy in my life is when my adorable grandkids come to visit. Today, my grandsons Graham and Kyle are coming over to play for the first time in a while, so I've been restless with anticipation since morning. Even though lunch preparations are done, I wander around the houses, feeling like something is missing. Ah, that's right. The camera. The other day, the twins, who just started elementary school, said they would show me their new school uniforms. I started looking for the camera so I could properly capture them in all their glory. Found it. Now I'm all set. Just as I finally felt at ease, I heard a car engine stop in front of the house. Grandma. Hello. Hello. Energetic voices rang out from the entryway. Coming. Welcome, you two. I called back as I hurried to the front door, where Graham and Kyle stood wearing their new backpacks and uniforms. Behind them, my son Lance and his wife Patricia walked up. Mom, I'm home. Hi, Felicity. Long time no see. I'm so glad you all could make it. Come on in. I welcomed my son's family into the house, and we had a photo shoot with the kids in their school uniforms. The sight of my grandchildren wearing backpacks slightly too big for their small frames was absolutely adorable. It was hard to tell if they were wearing the backpacks or if the backpacks were wearing them. Grandma, guess what? Kyle and I are in different classes, Graham shared excitedly. Yeah, I have a male teacher, and Graham has a female teacher, Kyle chimed in. That's right. My grandchildren are twins. When my only son Lance married Patricia 8 years ago, They surprised us all by having twins not long after. I remember being overjoyed at the thought of gaining 2 grandchildren at once. However, I have to admit I was quite shocked when Lance announced he was marrying Patricia. Lance had always been a gentle, serious boy who kept to himself throughout his school years, so I never imagined he'd choose such a strikingly beautiful and confident woman as his bride. Thanks to their stunning parents, Graham and Kyle have grown into quite the handsome young lads themselves. They might just be what you'd call beautiful boys. Patricia, eager to capitalize on their good looks, was determined to get the boys into the entertainment industry, signing them up for dance classes and dragging them to auditions. When they first started kindergarten, Graham and Kyle were too young to understand and simply went along with whatever Patricia had planned for them. As I prepared lunch in the kitchen with Lance, my mind wandered, curious about what the boys had been up to lately. While Patricia stepped out to the car to grab something she forgot, Lance leaned in and whispered, "Mom, there's something I need to tell you." It seemed to be about Graham and Kyle. Right after they started elementary school, they started rebelling, saying they didn't want to dance anymore and hated the idea of being on TV. For a while there, things were pretty rocky between them and Patricia. Apparently, as they developed stronger senses of self in elementary school, they made their feelings clear to Lance and Patricia. It seems they take after Lance, both shy and uncomfortable with being in the spotlight. Patricia tried her best to keep them going, but in the end, we decided to let them quit for their own well-being. It almost caused some serious tension between us, to be honest. Things are okay now, though, Lance confided in me quietly, not wanting Patricia or the kids to overhear. I had been worrying about how they were doing lately, but hadn't found the right moment to ask. I'm glad Lance opened up to me. It sounds like the boys are focusing on adjusting to their new school life now. We all gathered around the dining table as Graham and Kyle regaled us with tales of their school adventures. I had been concerned, knowing how reserved they can be, but I was relieved to see they seemed to be enjoying school. After a lively meal and conversation, my heart swelled with happiness as I watched them head home with bright smiles on their faces. A few months later, my son's family of 4 came to visit again. "So Graham, Kyle, what new things have you boys been up to lately?" I inquired. "I learned how to make my drawings move on the computer," Graham proclaimed proudly. "And I'm in the middle of learning the C programming language," Kyle added. "I'm sorry, I asked you to explain it to me, but it went right over my head. But it sounds like you're learning some incredible things." These days, both boys are far more passionate about computers than sports. I know next to nothing about computers myself. But from what Lance has told me, there's no doubt that Graham and Kyle's computer skills are leagues ahead of other kids their age. Lance and I both believe the twins have a real talent for computers and have high hopes for their future in the field. Lance has even been looking into programming classes in the area for them. I don't get why they're so into those boring computers. They'd be way more likely to get famous and make money if they got on TV instead, Patricia grumbled, clearly not thrilled with their budding interest in technology. Perhaps she still hasn't given up on her dreams of turning them into child stars. "What's the harm in letting the kids do what they love?" Lance said, trying to calm Patricia down. I nodded in agreement, thinking to myself, there's nothing that would make me happier than seeing my grandchildren thriving and doing what they enjoy. As time passed, Graham and Kyle entered the 6th grade. They were still as passionate about computers as ever, and apparently they had even completed and graduated from a programming class a few years prior. Lately, it seems Lance has been away on business trips frequently, often leaving the house empty. As a result, When Patricia's work schedule leaves the kids alone, Graham and Kyle often come over to my house to hang out. Dad's never home these days, so we can't go out and do anything fun, Kyle complained. Yeah, he promised we'd go camping next holiday, but who knows if he'll actually follow through, Graham added with a sigh. Your dad must be really busy with work. I'm sure he's doing his best and holding back his desire to spend time with you boys, so we should cheer him on, I encouraged them. Graham and Kyle seemed a bit dissatisfied with the lack of quality time with Lance due to his hectic work schedule. A while back, Lance had excitedly shared with me that he'd been put in charge of a major project that could make or break the company. That project must have finally kicked into high gear, and he's been working hard alongside his team. Come to think of it, I've started watching them overnight quite often recently, not just during the day. At first, I was more than happy to help out, thinking it would give Patricia a much-needed breather since she's practically raising the kids on her own while juggling work. However, it seems that every time Lance goes on a business trip, she ends up staying out overnight. While I absolutely adore spending time with my grandchildren, it feels like it's been happening a lot more frequently. Since they're in 6th grade now, I figured they wouldn't need too much hands-on care, but perhaps Patricia is finding it overwhelming. Felicity, sorry to bother you again. I'll be leaving them in your care today, Patricia called out breezily as she dashed off. Graham and Kyle would be staying over again tonight. Oh no, I forgot my cold medicine, Graham suddenly remembered. Oh dear, you've caught a cold. That's not good. Patricia just left, so why don't I give her a call and ask her to bring it over? I offered. I dialed Patricia's number. It rang several times, but no one picked up. Eventually, it went to voicemail. Patricia wasn't answering her phone. Mom, she didn't pick up. What should we do about the medicine? I hope Graham's cold doesn't get worse, I fretted. Oh yeah, Grandma, whenever Mom has something important going on, she turns her smartphone off, Graham chimed in. His words caught me off guard. What? So you're saying whenever she's busy with something important, there's no way to reach her at all? Yup, even when we call, it never goes through. But don't worry, Grandma. My cold isn't that bad. I'll be okay, Graham reassured me. Compared to my growing concern, the two boys seemed completely unfazed. Even if Patricia has something important going on, what would she do if there was an emergency with the kids? So far, nothing serious has happened, and the children are safe, but this is starting to feel like child neglect. I felt sorry for both Graham and Kyle, knowing their mom wasn't giving them the attention they needed, and spent the day with an unsettled feeling in my gut. The next evening, when Patricia came to pick them up, I decided to ask her about it. Patricia, Kyle forgot his medicine, so I tried calling you shortly after you left. Was it difficult for you to answer the phone? Oh, right. Sorry about that. I had my phone turned off. Didn't the kids tell you? She replied nonchalantly, as if it were perfectly normal. Ah, I see. But don't you think it might be better to keep your phone on in case something happens and we need to reach you? I was taken aback by Patricia's attitude and couldn't bring myself to say anything more. After that, Graham and Kyle stayed over a few more times. While I was watching them, I tried calling Patricia's smartphone several times for various reasons, but as expected, she never picked up. Then one afternoon, I received a call on my smartphone from an unknown number. It wasn't a number I recognized. I hesitantly answered the call and heard a man's frantic voice on the other end. Hello, is this Lance's mom? I'm Lance's coworker. I'm sorry for the sudden call. Please try to stay calm and listen. Lance is in the hospital right now. It took me a moment to process the words I was hearing. A wave of anxiety washed over me. I got the hospital's location from Lance's coworker and quickly called a taxi. On the way there, I couldn't settle my nerves, worried sick about Lance's condition. What could have happened for Lance to end up in the hospital? Was he going to be okay? That's right. I wonder if Patricia knows anything. I decided to try giving her a call first. Despite my desperate wish for her to pick up, the phone just kept ringing and ringing. Once again, she didn't answer. What on earth was she doing that she couldn't be reached even at a time like this? I called over and over, praying she would pick up, but the result was always the same. The entire way to the hospital, I kept trying to get in touch with her, but she never answered her phone. When I arrived at the hospital, Lance's coworker greeted me with tears in his eyes and filled me in on the situation. Apparently, he had suddenly collapsed at work and was rushed to the hospital by ambulance. They gave him the necessary treatment, but his condition was poor, and he still hadn't regained consciousness. I tried calling his wife, but no matter how many times I called, she just wouldn't pick up. That's why I contacted you, his mom, instead. Thank you so much for coming right away. So Patricia didn't answer her phone after all. Apparently, he had been suffering from insomnia lately, and his complexion had been poor, causing concern at work just before this happened. Was he so busy with work that he couldn't even sleep? Did he push himself too hard? I couldn't help but regret his diligent nature. I knew I needed to let Patricia know what was going on, so I decided to head to Lance's house. Worried sick about Lance's condition, I left the hospital with a heavy heart. When I arrived at Lance's house, Graham and Kyle were there alone, having just returned from school. "Grandma, what's going on?" "Oh, you're home. Is your mom not back yet?" "Not yet. Should we wait here for her?" I agonized over what to tell Graham and Kyle about him. Was it really my place to say something? I decided to wait until Patricia got home so we could explain the situation to the three of them together. After a while, she returned. "Patricia, did you check your smartphone? I called you so many times." Patricia rummaged through her purse and pulled out her smartphone. "Felicity, what's with the sudden visit?" "Oh, you're right. I do have a bunch of missed calls. Did something happen?" Despite feeling irritated by Patricia's attitude, I took a deep breath and spoke. "Patricia, Graham, Kyle, listen calmly. Lance collapsed at work today and is in the hospital now. The doctors did everything they could for him, but it seems he still hasn't regained consciousness." Shocked by the sudden news, Graham and Kyle froze, their faces etched with disbelief. Patricia, on the other hand, simply let out a surprised, "What?" But her expression remained unchanged as she fiddled with her smartphone. I had expected her to be more shocked and worried, so her reaction caught me off guard. My confusion was completely lost on her, who was absorbed in her smartphone. And so, the days passed by one. Our wish for Lance to wake up went unanswered as he remained unconscious. The doctor informed us that there was no prospect of him regaining consciousness, and we had to brace ourselves for the inevitable. A few days later, Lance's funeral was held. Graham and Kyle kept their heads down, not saying a word as tears streamed down their faces. They may be mature for their age, but they're still only in 6th grade. Having lost their beloved dad, they must be in the depths of despair. All I could do was stay by their side and rub their backs in comfort. Patricia, not seeming to care about her grieving children, sat there looking bored and greeting the attendees with a curt, indifferent demeanor. Lance's coworkers, subordinates, and even his bosses turned out in droves for the funeral. Every single one of them mourned his passing, their faces etched with deep regret and tears flowing freely. Seeing firsthand just how important my son had been to his company, my heart swelled with emotion. But something doesn't add up. I overheard some of Lance's coworkers talking as they left the funeral yesterday, and the content of their conversation is bothering me. The projects had finally gotten off the ground, and things were settling down. So why did he have to pass away so suddenly? He hadn't been working overtime lately, but his face looked so haggard. He mentioned he couldn't sleep. I wonder what was weighing on his mind. This conversation left a lasting impression on me and has been swirling around in my head ever since. I had thought that Lance's busy workload had taken its toll on him, leading to this. But his coworkers didn't mention anything like that at all. In fact, it seems like work had settled down, and they were worried about how he had been doing lately. If he was struggling with something to the point of insomnia, could there have been a reason other than work? With those questions lingering in my mind, we reached the end of the funeral. Ugh, finally, it's over. That took forever. Let's get out of here. Graham, Kyle, now that your dad is gone too, I don't have to take care of you brats anymore, right? Patricia said with a sneer as soon as the funeral ended. I don't think those are the kind of words a mother should be saying to her children with that expression. What could have possessed her to say such a thing? I can't fathom how she could say that to Graham and Kyle, who are in the midst of deep grief over losing their dad. Thinking there must be some mistake, I asked for clarification. Patricia, what do you mean by that all of a sudden? If these kids are around, they'll just get in my way. I don't need them. How can you say that? You're the only parent these children have left now. Think about it. I tried my best to calm Patricia down, thinking she must be out of her mind with grief. There's nothing to think about. This couldn't be more perfect. Now I can live with my boyfriend. Boyfriend? What boyfriend, Patricia? I'm remarrying a handsome doctor. The old hag can raise those twin brats. See ya. While I stood there in shock, Patricia selfishly spat out those lines and breezily walked away. The other attendees and I were stunned by this sudden turn of events. It's fine. After Patricia left, I muttered under my breath, I'll take responsibility for Graham and Kyle. Rather than growing up with the pain of being abandoned by their mom, I'm sure I can provide them with a much better environment living with me. More than anything, I'm happy to have the chance to live with my adorable grandchildren. As I steeled my resolve in my heart, Graham spoke up. Grandma, can we live with you? Of course you can. That goes without saying. Graham smiled, looking relieved. I'd rather live with Grandma than Mom. Mom's never home anyway. I don't think she cares about us, Kyle said. His words pierced my heart. What kind of mother makes her children say such things? Was Patricia really that indifferent to them? We stopped by Lance's house to quickly pack some of Graham and Kyle's things before finally making it back to my place. After finishing dinner, Graham and Kyle seemed exhausted, barely speaking and looking sleepy. They must be physically and emotionally drained after today. Not only did they have to say goodbye to their dad, but their mom up and left them too. I can't help but worry about their mental state. They both seem so calm, as if they've already accepted this sudden turn of events, but who knows what thoughts are swirling in their minds. Rather than saying anything, I suppose all I can do for now is keep an eye on them. You two must be so tired after everything today. Get some good rest, okay? Once I finish tidying up, I should get to bed early too. By the time I was done with the housework, Graham and Kyle were no longer in the living room. It seems they had taken their showers and gone back to their room. I finally crawled into bed and let out a deep sigh. Suddenly, the events of the day flashed through my mind like a whirlwind. Does Patricia really intend to give up her children for good? Even though it was late, I tried calling her one more time, wanting to confirm how she really felt. I had a sliver of hope that she might answer, but the call went straight to voicemail. I was so utterly exhausted, the day feeling longer than ever before. My eyelids grew heavy on their own. At 2 o'clock, I was awoken by the strange sound of laughter coming from the next room. Thinking I must be hearing things, I listened closer, but the laughter indeed continued. They were supposed to be sleeping in the room next door. Those boys should be fast asleep, right? I thought to myself as I quietly crept over to peek into their room, just to be sure. When I opened the door, there were two faces illuminated by the pale blue glow of a computer screen in the darkness. Graham and Kyle, who I thought were sleeping, were actually laughing as they looked at the computer. "What are you two doing up in the middle of the night like this?" "Oh, Grandma, did we wake you?" "Sorry about that." "Hey, Grandma, come take a look at this." I did as they asked and peered at the computer screen. "Patricia? Darling? Whose WhatsApp is this?" "Don't tell me." "Yup, this is Mom's WhatsApp with her boyfriend." On the computer screen, I saw a log of Patricia's WhatsApp conversation with a man who appeared to be her boyfriend. "Grandma, you probably have a notification on your smartphone by now, too." At their prompting, I went to grab my smartphone and checked. Sure enough, there was a notification. I opened it to find the same WhatsApp log that was displayed on the computer screen had been sent to me. "How did you do this? Was it you too?" Graham and Kyle answered with bright, clear faces. "Yeah, we did it." By now, the image should have been sent to everyone registered in Mom's smartphone. "What? What do you mean?" Confused, I asked the two of them to explain the situation. "I think it's Mom's fault that Dad collapsed," Graham said. Apparently, Lance had grown suspicious of Patricia's increasingly frequent overnight absences lately. Graham overheard Lance confronting Patricia, demanding to know where she was and what she was doing, but she completely ignored him and brushed him off. "Maybe it's because we're still kids. I'm sure Dad was struggling with something, but he never told us anything." It seems Lance was agonizing over how to deal with Patricia's frequent absences and her constantly leaving the children with me. Sometimes when I was sleeping next to Dad, I'd wake up because I could hear him making pained noises. Maybe he was feeling so crushed he couldn't even sleep, Kyle shared. Call it a child's intuition, but they had noticed their dad was under a lot of stress and not getting enough sleep. "But you know, our uncles and aunts were saying it was because he was so busy with work. It's totally Mom's fault, though," Graham said, looking frustrated. "I couldn't say it was Mom's fault at the funeral because no one would believe a kid, but..." So after the funeral, I decided to show everyone the evidence by programming Mom's smartphone. They figured, even if they tried to tell the adults that their dad had collapsed, no one would believe them, and Patricia would certainly stop them if they tried to speak the truth. I was surprised they would expose her like this, no matter how good they were with computers. The two of them spoke with such bright, clear faces. I couldn't help but be impressed. Still, I wondered how they had managed to manipulate Patricia's smartphone when she was rarely home. So I asked, Mom's really bad at using smartphones and PC devices. That's why we always set things up for her. We memorized all her passwords and stuff then. We happened to see her WhatsApp too, and that's how we figured out who she was always with. When Mom's with that guy she calls darling, she really does turn her smartphone off. So we made it so the information would send when she turned it off. So if the images are being sent now, that means her phone is off. Look, all the evidence we prepared is being sent. I checked the notifications on my own smartphone. The brats are going to the old hag's house, so I'll be with Darling today and tomorrow. Darling is so handsome and talented, but my husband, he works so hard all the time, but barely makes any money. There's no comparison. Maybe I should frame my husband for cheating so I can divorce him and get a big payout in the settlement. There were so many unbelievable messages. As I opened the notifications, I even saw some about Graham and Kyle. I thought they'd be able to make money since I gave birth to such handsome boys. But neither of them wants to enter the entertainment industry, and they don't have the guts to stick with it. Unbelievable. I paid so much money for their dance lessons and auditions. Such a waste. Those kids are nothing but a disappointment. What a mother she is. She forced her own selfish desires on her children and then calls them a disappointment. I really feel for these poor kids. I had always sensed that Patricia was a woman who spoke her mind, but I never imagined she would badmouth others with such a foul mouth. I thought she was just being rude at the funeral because emotions were running high. But is this her true nature? I wonder if Lance knew this was the kind of person she was, or if he had been deceived. Discovering Patricia's true colors was a huge shock to me. In stark contrast to my shock, Graham and Kyle seemed to have rather refreshed expressions on their faces. I bet our relatives and Mom's friends are all freaking out right about now. A few days later, I received a call from Patricia's mom. I can't even begin to apologize for my daughter's actions. I don't know how to make amends. She kept apologizing profusely, sounding incredibly remorseful. Since what's done is done and can't be undone, I accepted her apology and asked how Patricia was doing. According to her mom, ever since the exposé, her relatives and friends had cut ties with her. As a result, she had no idea where Patricia was or what she was doing now. I guess that's to be expected. I thought to myself, unsurprised. To be honest, there were days when I worried if I had made the right choice by suddenly taking in Graham and Kyle. But I was relieved that we had cut ties with Patricia early on before she could derail these children's lives any further. I truly believe they'll be able to live much happier lives without Patricia's influence. And apparently, even the man she was cheating with, who she was so keen on remarrying, saw her true colors and dumped her. But that wasn't all. This time, with the evidence of her infidelity spreading even to her friends, one of them decided to track down and investigate the man she was cheating with. As it turns out, he had a bad reputation with women and was dating a bunch of them. She was just one of many. Moreover, his claim of being a doctor was a lie. He was actually just a regular employee at a small company. It seems he's in big trouble now that people around him have caught wind of his numerous misdeeds. Some time later, I received a call from Lance's company. They informed me that they would be treating Lance's death as a work-related accident, so we would be receiving compensation. I knew that his death wasn't the company's fault, so I felt terribly guilty about it being recognized as a work-related accident and receiving compensation. I couldn't just keep quiet and accept the money, so I went to see Lance's boss. I'm so sorry for all the trouble my son has caused. The truth is, he didn't collapse because of work. It was due to the stress from his wife, I explained, detailing everything that had happened. Lance's boss looked shocked as he finished listening to my story, but his expression quickly turned serious again. No, regardless of the reason, we want you to accept the compensation. Please think of it as our final way of recognizing Lance's contributions, he said. He had apparently brought the projects to the verge of completion, and thanks to his efforts, it had been a huge success. Lance's contributions were immense, and they said the project never would have gotten off the ground without him pushing it forward. This project had been the catalyst for the company's significant growth, so they were immensely grateful to him, but regretted not being able to express their appreciation directly. I was so happy to hear them hold him in such high regard. Lance's life, spent working diligently and doing his best, hadn't been in vain after all. If only I could tell him directly that the project had succeeded, that the company had grown thanks to him. But that wish will never come true. Hoping that he would be rewarded even a little in heaven, I decided to accept the compensation money. The amount was more than enough to cover Graham and Kyle's future educational expenses. Just as Lance had said when he was alive, I want the two of them to grow up doing what they love without any restraints. Someday, they'll both have dreams of their own. I don't want them to give up on their dreams just because they're living with me and don't have their parents around. I decided to carefully save this money so that when the time comes, I can give them plenty of options to choose from. With a renewed determination to raise these two to become people who can contribute to society, just like Lance, I made up my mind. From now on, the three of us will live happily together, keeping him in our thoughts.
Harold was left jobless when his company folded. Desperate, he pleaded with his uncle and managed to get a position at his uncle's company. A year later, I received a photo and a message on my mobile phone from Harold's mistress. "I'm Harold's lover. Can't wait to live together." Ignoring the message, I came home from work the next day to find most of the furniture gone. A note left on the kitchen counter was penned in Harold's handwriting. "I moved to Natalie's place." I called Harold. "Where are you? Maybe I should hire you?" The sugary voice likely belonged to Natalie. "If you're okay being a housekeeper, I'll give you the address." Natalie seemed to be under a major misunderstanding. "Then, it's divorce with Harold, who only earns $8 an hour. If you want to talk in your sleep." Ah, she knows nothing. Poor thing. I told her I'd contact her once the divorce preparations were complete, then hung up. Just you watch. Soon, I'll plunge you from the height of happiness to the depths of despair. I am Michelle, a 50-year-old working mother. I work for the company run by my uncle. I met Harold, my husband of 20 years, at a gathering among friends. He seemed like a great guy, and after he approached me as we were leaving, we started dating after meeting a few times. Harold had lost his dad in middle school, but his stepmother Isabella came from a wealthy family. After graduating from a prestigious university and working for a major corporation, he always seemed to have financial and emotional leeway, which showed in his attitude. Thanks to this, Harold was always attentive to me. On anniversaries, he'd go all out with presents, luxurious dinners, hotels with beautiful night views, and even bouquets of flowers. Treated like a princess, I was over the moon. When we decided to get married, I was thrilled, thinking I could build a happy home with him. Little did I know, I'd regret it so soon. Since middle school, Isabella had lived alone with Harold, so it was easy to imagine she'd interfere in our marriage. However, Isabella, living in the next town, never visited our apartment and didn't rush us to visit her in-laws' home either. "She seems busy with theater, traveling with friends, or concerts," I was told. Hearing this, I felt relieved. Soon after, I became pregnant, and both Isabella and Harold were more delighted than I, savoring the happiness. But it was around this time that dark clouds began to loom over our marriage. Harold started going out on weekends. Despite my being weak from morning sickness, he'd casually go skiing, camping, or traveling, making me question his sensitivity. Getting married and then leaving the house empty every weekend is just strange. When I complained, Harold cocked his head. It's impossible to take a pregnant wife with me. Oh. Then, should I invite people over? Maybe around 5 or 6 each week. Harold's face lit up with excitement. Wouldn't that be fun for you, too? For a barbecue, everyone could bring some vegetables or meat. It would surely take your mind off things. I was dumbfounded. He knows I can't eat because of the nausea, and he says this? That's obviously not going to work. I shouted, and Harold frowned in displeasure. What's wrong with going out and having fun with my own money on weekends? I'm not saying don't go, but you're not single anymore. I just wish you'd be more considerate. Harold looked even more disgusted. You should be the one more considerate. What? I'm providing a comfortable life thanks to me, and you're not grateful enough. I'm working for both of us, so you should be more devoted. You're the wife, after all. With those arrogant words, he grabbed his suitcase and left the house. As the sound of the car engine faded, I slumped into the sofa, feeling gloomy. I could understand where Harold was coming from. But leaving a pregnant wife alone, spending weekdays drinking late with colleagues, and weekends playing with single friends every week, is questionable. He hasn't shaken off his bachelor mindset. Would becoming a father next year bring some sense of responsibility? I had no choice but to believe he would change. Eventually, a boy was safely born. The child we named Cody was growing well. Please don't come to the maternity hospital, Harold had asked Isabella, so I was grateful for the quiet time in the room. However, the backlash was tremendous. After being discharged, Isabella, along with friends, repeatedly barged into my apartment. The first time was just after I had finally managed to put Cody to sleep. The moment I sat down on the sofa to rest, the intercom rang loudly, making my heart jump. Checking the monitor, there was Isabella and several older women. Reluctantly unlocking the door, Isabella and her friends made a grand entrance, stormed into the living room, and dashed for the crib they found. Oh, how cute! Right? He looks just like Harold. Really? Do you think so? You just love Harold too much, that's why you think so. Oh, he's opening his eyes. Cody, sleepy and dazed, quickly twisted his face and started crying loudly. Michelle, hurry and soothe him. It's cruel to let him cry so much. And make some tea. I'd like some herbal tea and snacks, please. While holding back my irritation, I picked up Cody to soothe him. Isabella and her friends surrounded me, poking Cody's cheeks and stroking his head as if he were a pet. It's nice, isn't it? I want a grandchild soon too. We have 2 girls. I keep telling my daughter-in-law we need a boy next. Listening to their conversation, Isabella looked smug. Like a storm, Isabella and her friends came, chatted beside me soothing Cody, made a mess with snacks, and left. When I complained to Harold after he returned from work, he strangely smiled. Mom wanted to show off her grandson to her friends. It's cute what she did. I recoiled in shock. Listen, I'm only 3 days post-discharge. I'm in a daze, nursing every 2 hours, and managing the household. His indifferent response irritated me. It took another 2 hours to put Cody back to sleep. Please, no more unannounced visits. Tell Isabella. At my plea, Harold visibly grimaced. Mom and her friends came all this way to celebrate. Instead of being grateful, why complain? Feeling utterly frustrated with Harold's lack of understanding, I wished I had given birth back at my parents' home, even if it meant hours by plane and train. My parents live with my brother and his wife, who have young kids, so I hesitated to return home. Harold, you're not involved in childcare at all. You don't understand. Can't you look after Cody once in a while? I pleaded earnestly. Maybe just for an hour on the weekend? I'd like to visit the salon or relax at a cafe for a bit. So, you want to skip mom's duties? Harold laughed derisively. Every mom raises her kids alone. If you can't, you're a failure as a mom. That's cruel. Don't say that. It's the truth. He glared at me, speaking bluntly. Can't believe you'd ask to waste my precious weekend. I'm the one providing for you. Isn't that enough? If you want to be pampered, go back to your parents' house. And don't come back. Throwing those cold words at me, Harold walked away to the bathroom. Left alone in the room, I wiped my eyes, and Cody, sensing my mood, started to fuss. Holding Cody, I felt a deep sense of despair. He used to be so kind. How could he change so much? Or was this his true nature all along? Eventually, I began to think, in a way, Isabella might be better than Harold. She showed interest in Cody, entertained him with toys, and talked to him. Harold, strangely, showed little interest in Cody. Only after much insistence did he start taking showers with Cody on weekends, but he refused to do any other caregiving. Even in the same room, Harold was engrossed in his mobile phone games, brushing Cody away irritably when he crawled up. Whether Cody laughed in his adorable voice or babbled in baby talk, Harold remained indifferent. Could such a person ever become a dad-like figure? Just starting on this journey of parenthood, I felt overwhelmed by anxiety. Isabella continued to bring different friends over, but once Cody turned 3 and began to express his own opinions, showing signs of independence, she stopped visiting altogether. It seemed Cody's cuteness had diminished for her. After enjoying a brief period of peace, I approached Harold about starting work. I want to start working soon. There seems to be a spot available at the nearby daycare. Why? My salary should be enough for us to get by. Harold responded, visibly displeased. A wife should stay at home and take care of me and the child. I almost laughed at his outdated views, but I humbly pleaded with him. I want to save up for Cody's college fund. Can I work part-time, please? Fine, but don't let the housework slide. I plan to work at my uncle's company. Harold smirked. Oh, a nepotism hire, huh? They need a female office worker. So, they say. Well, work hard at that tiny company that might go under at any moment. His mocking tone annoyed me, and I bit my lip. Your company does business with them, you know. Ha! Well, tell them not to cause any trouble for us. His arrogance, despite being just an assistant manager, infuriated me. I decided then that I would work hard, save up, and divorce this man. With that secret hope, I worked diligently. As Cody grew and balancing work and home became manageable, I switched to a full-time position and worked even harder. One evening, Harold came home looking downcast. Welcome back. What's wrong? Our company is going under. What? Bankrupt. Rushing to check my phone, I saw articles about Harold's company. Harold looked awkwardly at the floor, a sight I hadn't expected. I'd heard about the poor performance, but I never imagined it would collapse. What will we do? Guess I'll have to find a job at another company, he said dismissively, dropping his commuter bag to the floor. Panic set in. Living on my salary alone was doable, but saving would be tough. For now, I planned to dip into the savings I'd secretly amassed for a potential divorce and use it for Cody's college fund. Despite Harold's bluster at home, we had been comfortably living off his income. Losing that would be a significant blow. I could only hope he'd find a new job before the unemployment benefits ran out. However, Harold's determination only lasted a month. Soon, he fell into a routine of staying up late and sleeping in, leading a sloppy life. I was frustrated that Harold used all his unemployment benefits as pocket money without contributing to the household. Watching him play mobile games while sprawled on the couch, as I cooked and cleaned, made my anger nearly boil over multiple times. Hey, maybe it's time to seriously look for a job. You're almost 40. It might become harder to find the job you want after that. When I gently pushed him, Harold angrily retorted, "Shut up! I'm looking on job sites." "But I've never seen you write a resume." "I'm carefully selecting a company worthy of me," he declared arrogantly. "I graduated from a top university. Working for a low-grade company would tarnish my reputation. You, coming from a lesser background, wouldn't understand." Oh, is that so? After countless exchanges like this, with no progress, 10 years passed. As Cody faced college entrance exams and was swamped with studies, even during long vacations, Harold, in his jersey and with a stubble, was still engrossed in his games. I thought about giving up and divorcing him many times. Since his family was wealthy, Harold could live with Isabella without worrying about ending up on the streets. But, feeling it was too harsh to abandon an unemployed husband, I couldn't make that step, and before I knew it, 10 years had flown by. Unable to bear it any longer, I finally decided to use my connections. I pleaded with my uncle to employ Harold. Fortunately, the branch office in the next town was looking for someone in sales, which was perfect. "Hey, how about working at my uncle's company?" One evening, I broached the subject to Harold, excited. "I mentioned your background, and they said it would be a waste not to have you join us." Of course, it was a complete lie, but Harold, true to my expectations, took the bait due to his pride. "Well, a high-caliber person like me is rare in small and medium enterprises. They must want me at any cost." He seemed quite pleased with the idea. "So, should I proceed with the discussion?" What to do? After feigning indecision, his eyes were glued to the mobile phone screen I opened. "Oh, this? It's from a new product exhibition." "Huh. Looks fun." He mused nostalgically, whispering, "I might work at your company." "Really? That's great. But it's been a while, so I want to start with 3 days a week. And make sure I can leave on time." I was at a loss for words. "Well, as you know, our company has a complete 2-day weekend system, Saturdays and Sundays off. End of month and busy periods require overtime, and special treatment is difficult." Harold's eyes widened in anger. "Listen, I'm working again after a long break. It's like rehabilitation. And you want me to start with long hours? Do you want me, a delicate person, to get sick?" I was infuriated by Harold's words. For the past 10 years, I've balanced housework, child-rearing, and full-time work, supporting you, right? But, not wanting to upset him, I swallowed the complaints that rose to my throat. After consulting with my uncle, Harold was offered a part-time job with lower hourly pay than the market rate, allowing him to finally escape unemployment after 10 years. Harold, who resumed working, quickly became lively. Seeing him clean-shaven and in a suit was moving. Though he had thinned on top and his figure had changed, a bit of his youthful freshness seemed to return. The day when he could work hard as before might be near. Then, I could ask him to contribute to the household expenses again. Relieved, I wondered. It's fine for him to work 3 days, but what about the other 4? On Harold's days off, he was invariably out when I returned from work. He often came home late, smelling of alcohol, possibly frequenting cocktail lounges, but could he afford that on his meager salary? The occasional scent of women's perfume on his clothes was also suspicious. If it were a cocktail lounge, the scents would mix. Yet it was always the same scent. About a year after Harold found a new job, I received a photo and message from an unknown number on my mobile phone. It was a picture of Harold snuggling in bed with a heavily made-up woman. I recognized the woman. She was Natalie, a hostess who had attended a new product launch at my company. "I'm Harold's mistress. Can't wait to live together." Although I was stunned, I wasn't particularly shocked. My affection for Harold had cooled long ago. So he was cheating after all. I sighed. He must have looked up Natalie from the new product launch photos stored on the company computer and seduced her. As I stared at the image, anger welled up within me. He had the nerve to do this after getting a job through my connections. I called Harold, but the call rang endlessly without answer, and my angry messages remained unread. That night, Harold didn't come home. Moreover, he started skipping work without notice from the next day. "Skipping work for a mistress? What are you thinking? You're going to lose the job you finally got." I sent that message during my lunch break, but still, there was no reply. Returning home feeling agitated, I noticed the room felt oddly spacious. Looking around, I realized most of the furniture was gone. The Scandinavian sofa set, the wooden table, the 2-seater dining table, the stylish shelf, the chic TV board. All purchased with my salary. Shocked, I stood frozen when I noticed a piece of paper on the floor in the center of the room. In round handwriting alongside Harold's, it read, "I'm taking Harold away. I've moved to Natalie's place. Don't bother trying to get me back." Crumpling the note, I called Harold again. The moment it connected, I was ready to yell. "What's the meaning of this? Where are you? You're so upset." "Hilarious." A nasal, sweet voice, probably Natalie's, responded. "Should I offer you a job?" "What?" "If you're okay being a housekeeper, I'll give you the address." Her presumptuous tone almost made me burst into laughter. Natalie seemed to be under a major misunderstanding. "Then, it's divorce with Harold, who only earns $8 an hour. If you want to talk in your sleep." Ah, she knows nothing. Poor thing. Suppressing my laughter, I pleaded in a pathetic voice. "I'd be in trouble if Harold left me. How will I live?" Then Natalie burst out laughing on the other end of the line. "You're just a gold digger for Harold, aren't you? A housewife dumped by her husband, how miserable." "It's tough, honestly, but I don't want to complain and make Harold hate me more. Tell Harold to call me once the divorce is ready. Thanks for being so understanding. Bye." After hanging up the phone, I clenched my back teeth. Enough with the mockery. Just you watch. I'll knock you from the pinnacle of happiness to the depths of despair. I silently vowed. After confiding in my uncle, I decided to make Harold resign and determined to make them fully realize the consequences of their actions. I hired a private investigator for a conduct investigation and did as much research as I could on Harold and Natalie. 2 weeks later, I sent a message to Harold. "I want to discuss our divorce. please come to my place with Natalie." The two of them showed up at the appointed time, hand in hand, smugly smiling as if to flaunt their relationship to me. As I led them into the living room, Natalie sneered. "Wow, haven't bothered to replace the furniture? You really are broke." Well, being a gold digger to a big corporation worker like Harold, it's understandable. "Excuse me? You stole my furniture and you have the nerve to say that? I could report you to the police, you know." "Oh, please. That sounds terrible. I just moved the furniture Harold bought himself during the move." Just as Harold said, "You're not too bright." Natalie's disdain was palpable. Turning to Harold, who awkwardly averted his eyes from me. It was clear he was trying to impress Natalie. When the furniture was replaced because it was old, Harold was unemployed, and my salary was all we had. To lie so blatantly when it's bound to be discovered, who's the dumb one here? Muttering curses under my breath, I addressed Harold. "Harold, you feel the same way as I do, right? That is, you want a divorce?" "Yeah." Harold nodded, looking displeased. "I'm sick of taking care of a worn-out old woman like you." He spat out disdainfully. "Meeting Natalie made me realize that everything that hasn't worked out in our 20 years of marriage is all your fault." I couldn't believe my ears. That's my line. "Being with you has brought my luck down. That's why I'm leaving you to start my life over." Then he made a demand. "What?" "Alimony. You've been a nuisance for 20 years of marriage, haven't you? I'm generous, so I'll let you off with $100,000. Come on, hand it over. You can even give me your bank account, and I'll withdraw it myself." His haughty tone made me feel not just angry, but somehow sad. He can't live with Natalie on his current salary, so he's begging me for money. High pride, but stooping so low. All right. It must be expensive to live with 5 people, after all. Really? Are you sure? His eyes sparkled before he puzzledly asked, 5 people? I smiled and explained to Harold. Yes, that's right. Natalie and her 3 kids. From the top, they're in junior high, 6th grade, and 5 years old, right? All girls, aren't they? Natalie's face drained of color. Surprised, Harold glanced back and forth between me and Natalie, showing his confusion. With kids? I knew about the divorce, but kids are news to me. Natalie, what is she talking about? Natalie, lips sealed, remained silent, and Harold's eyes widened in shock. Seriously? No way. He muttered, disappointed. Harold must have cheated on me, thinking Natalie was divorced with no kids. From the envelope handed to me by the investigator, I took out the report and a stack of photos, choosing those showing Natalie with the kids and spread them on the floor. Good luck with the challenging ages, Harold, I said with a touch of sarcasm. It's highly doubtful you, who declared hating kids and dumped all childcare on me, not even wanting to bond with your own son, will be embraced by someone else's children. No, it'll be fine. Look, they all resemble Natalie and are cute, so I'm sure I'll come to like them. Harold forced a smile and held Natalie's hand. Natalie, looking up, remained uneasy. Then, the intercom rang with Isabella's voice coming from the other side, causing Harold to start. Why is Mom coming? I told her we're divorcing because of your affair, and she insisted on being present. I replied, and Harold grimaced as if swallowing a bitter bug. Opening the door, Isabella barged into the room, pushing past me with heavy footsteps and immediately started yelling at Natalie upon entering the living room. You home wrecker! Natalie, eyes wide, quickly put on a smile and tried to charm Isabella. Isabella, their marriage was already over. So, your term is incorrect. No, it's not. The thief is you and not my daughter-in-law. You stole my precious son from me. Isabella pointed a finger at Natalie, spitting as she shouted. The daughter-in-law is plain. The mistress is a thick makeup-wearing mother. Harold has no eye for women. Harold hung his head as he was scolded. And now, 3 daughters? Fooled by seduction by such a failure who can't even bear a son. Without me, you fall for the worst women. Harold lifted his face, weakly protesting. Don't speak ill of Natalie, Mom. It was her previous husband who was no good. If she remarries me, she'll surely bear a boy. Right, Natalie? Yes. Natalie's cheeks twitched as Isabella glared at her venomously. Trust that? If you're going to remarry the mistress, take Cody with you. Then I'll consider it. Harold's eyebrows dropped in dismay. What? I don't want that brat. He's bad at online games and doesn't bond with me at all. Not cute at all. His selfish remarks infuriated me. After all, he hardly ever played with him from a young age, always shooing him away. Isabella, it's impossible for me to take Cody. I interjected, unable to hold back any longer. Be quiet, you too. He's already 19, living in a university dorm. He's very independent and plans to live on his own after graduation. I won't let you do as you please. It's common sense for a boy to return to his father's family home after a divorce. Isabella's eyes widened in surprise. That's a piece of common sense I'm hearing for the first time in my life. My frustration with the ever unreasonable Isabella grew. Harold. After remaining silent for a while, Natalie timidly tugged at Harold's sleeve. What is it, Natalie? Seeing Harold's sloppy smile made me angry. If he's your child, I'm sure he would be cute. But having 4 kids? Are we financially okay? To this legitimate concern, Harold confidently replied. Don't worry, Natalie. As I've told you before, my family is wealthy. Plus, I'm a high-income director at a large corporation. Marrying me means you'll be set for life. At his words, Natalie's face lit up with joy. I'm so happy. Then I don't have to work at the cocktail lounge anymore. Being a hostess was getting hard at my age. It's been tough for you. From now on, I'll protect you, so you can rest easy. Hearing Harold's pretentious statement as he embraced Natalie, I felt nauseous. Doesn't lying so much ever make you feel guilty? I wondered. My guests probably felt the same. Suddenly, the door separating the next room from the living room opened. It might have been slightly earlier than planned, but the timing could not have been better. Seeing the person who suddenly appeared, Harold shouted. Startled, he quickly turned away. The woman who opened the door looked over at the confused Isabella and Natalie and greeted them with a polite smile. Nice to meet you. I'm Serena Tucker, the daughter of the owner of Tucker Industry where Harold worked 10 years ago. The Tucker Industry? Natalie and Isabella's eyes widened. Thank you for your politeness. Oh, isn't that the company where my son is currently employed? Yes, Isabella. Harold, what's wrong? Harold, who had been brimming with confidence until moments ago, started to tremble slightly. See, everything gets revealed like this. What do you plan to do now? Unable to contain a smile, I covered my mouth with my hand. I thought it was strange. That company not following up on the re-employment of its former employees was unheard of. After revisiting old newspaper articles, I found that most employees were referred to affiliated companies or subcontractors. Then, tracking down a former colleague close to Harold using the address from a Christmas card, I discovered a shocking truth. Harold, you were fired just before the company went bankrupt. Harassing Serena, an intern at the headquarters, and enraging the CEO was the cause. Natalie and Isabella were dumbfounded. Ridiculous, right? A 20-year-old college girl would never have an affair with a nearly 40-year-old unremarkable assistant manager. Too much confidence can be a bad thing. With a mocking laugh, Natalie looked at Harold incredulously. Harold, did you really pester a college girl? What's with that face? It's only natural for a man to pursue young, wealthy women. Got a problem with that? Natalie and Isabella were shocked at Harold's brazenness. Wait, assistant manager? So, Harold, where are you working now? At my uncle's company. His title is a part-time job at $8 an hour. He'd been unemployed for 10 years, so I got him working again by kicking him in the rear. I explained the details to Natalie and Isabella with a smile. I got him the job at my uncle's company through my connections. Despite the rule that he should work every weekday, he insisted on working only 3 days a week, so I had to plead to my uncle. Isabella let out a strange cry. It seems she hadn't heard anything from Harold. Natalie, all the furniture you two took was bought with my salary. When we replaced it, Harold was a mobile phone game addict and unemployed with zero savings. But, Natalie muttered in disbelief. Harold used to brag about how he was the one providing for his wife. He always complained you weren't grateful enough. The pot calling the kettle black, right? I glared sharply at Harold, who was cringing uncomfortably, and unleashed the anger I'd been storing up. While you were unemployed and lazy, I was desperately working, balancing housework and child-rearing. As a woman, that's to be expected. Nothing to brag about, Harold shouted back defiantly. And yet you always looked down on me, and even after getting re-employed through my uncle's company, instead of being grateful, you went and got yourself a mistress. How much more do you intend to belittle me? Shut up! A part-time job through connections and you're acting all high and mighty. And when was that? I laughed contemptuously. What are you talking about? Too bad. I'm now a senior vice president, I announced cheerfully, and Harold stiffened. What? Say senior vice president? That's right. Unfortunately for you, I'm earning more now than when you were an assistant manager. Liar! A third-rate university graduate like you couldn't possibly be earning that much. When I showed him my salary slip, Harold's face twisted in pain before he finally hung his head in defeat. Then, Isabella, seemingly recovered from the shock, wrapped an arm around Harold's shoulders and sneered at me. Challenging your husband despite being just a daughter-in-law, how impudent. It's because of your attitude that Harold grew tired and sought a mistress. Tired of even bothering to respond, I ignored her as Isabella comforted Harold with sweet, gentle words. Harold, leave them and come back to Mom's place. I'll find you a suitable wife. You can have a son with another woman. Yeah, I'll do that. Harold looked apologetically at Natalie. Sorry, Natalie. Since you don't have Mom's blessing, I have to break up with you. At those words, Natalie's expression turned ferocious. She stood up abruptly, face flushed with rage, and yelled. I'll be more than happy to. You lying womanizer. I thought marrying a director of a large company might be worth it, but what a mistake. Grabbing her designer bag, she pulled out her mobile phone, wallet, and makeup pouch, then hurled the bag at Harold. I wouldn't be with a 15-year-older man otherwise. Thinking you're desirable with your delusional is just gross. Natalie, don't touch me. Shoving away Harold's grasping hand, Natalie left in a huff. Serena, who had been watching everything, bowed to me and left. Here's the divorce petition. Sign it and submit it to the office. If it's too much trouble, send it back to me in the envelope I included. I handed the divorce petition to a tearful and frozen Harold, then informed Isabella. We'll go through lawyers for the arrangements for the divorce compensation. The discussion is over, so please take him with you. I was leaving anyway. Harold, let's go back now and come for your things later. As I saw Isabella and Harold out, I mentioned one more thing. Oh yes, please also settle the $80,000 debt he's accumulated from our joint account for online gaming. He went back to being jobless, so I'll be sending the bill to you, Isabella. Take care. Isabella turned back, blinking in disbelief. What? It's for his online gaming. Since Harold's jobless again, I'll be sending the bill to you. Bye now. I pushed them out the door, locked it immediately, and breathed a sigh of relief. The next day, Harold sent back the signed divorce papers, which I promptly submitted to the office. To my surprise, the compensation amount I requested was deposited into my account without any complaints from Harold. Isabella must have covered it to get rid of me quickly. The stolen furniture was also returned in good condition, which was a relief. When I demanded compensation from Natalie, the money was soon deposited into my account, and then, to my surprise, Natalie's mother brought her to my house. Encouraged by her mother, Natalie apologized to me with a displeased look. Her mother was also very apologetic. The compensation her mother covered will be paid back by Natalie, who will now have to juggle her cocktail lounge job with another part-time job. It's good that her mother is a sensible person. Afterwards, though I thought Harold would get along with Isabella, their relationship apparently soured. Back to being jobless, Harold showed no signs of seeking employment, immersing himself in online gaming, and spending Isabella's savings and pension. He used to be so cute, but my daughter-in-law turned my son into a fool. If this continues, I'll lose all my savings. I wish he would leave the house. Isabella supposedly complained to neighbors. Finally free from Harold, I've been feeling refreshed and living each day to the fullest. If I knew it would be this liberating, I would have cut ties sooner. When I told Cody about the divorce over the phone, he replied cheerfully, "You finally made up your mind. Congratulations! He's still your dad, so if you ever want to see him, you can." What? I never want to see him again. My family is just you, Mom. His straightforward response made me laugh. Now it's time for your second life, Mom. In both work and personal life, you're free to do as you please without being tied down by anyone. Yeah, I will. Thank you. Encouraged by my son's words, I smiled warmly. Moving forward, Cody and I plan to live happily and make the most of the rest of our lives together. I'm Jessica, a 38-year-old office worker. I have been married to my husband, Brandon, for 5 years now. However, we've been struggling to have children. Being the eldest and only son, Brandon has always been under pressure from his mother, Chloe, to have a boy since we got married. These days, few people care about the gender of their children, and either a son or daughter can be an heir. Brandon himself doesn't care about the gender and says there's no rush to have children. But Chloe sees me as an adversary and always tells me when Brandon's not around. A woman who can't have children is useless in this family. If you can't have one, you might as well leave. Her words have hurt me deeply. I'm sorry, Chloe, but honestly, your words are very pressuring. I wish you wouldn't say such things. I finally gathered the courage to express my feeling to Chloe. But she didn't understand it at all and became even more oppressive, telling me not to defy her. I was shocked. I never expected such words from her. At first, I endured it because she's Brandon's mother and I didn't want to cause any trouble. But enduring Chloe's sarcasm while undergoing fertility treatments was mentally taxing, and my health started to decline. Realizing I couldn't hide it anymore, I confided in Brandon. Furious, Brandon sternly warned Chloe, which stopped her surprise visits to our apartment for a while, but she continued to hurl insults daily through WhatsApp. Then one day, I found out I was pregnant at the fertility clinic. The first sight of the fetal ultrasound filled me with indescribable emotions. When I showed Brandon the ultrasound at home, we both cried tears of joy. But our happiness was short-lived as I remembered a significant problem. Chloe. Telling her about the pregnancy would surely lead to her frequent visits, insisting that pregnancy isn't an illness, telling me to move around, or bragging about her own experiences. The doctor advised me not to overexert myself until a heartbeat is confirmed, so I was torn about what to do. After discussing with Brandon, we decided I should stay at my parents' house for a while. If I'm at my parents' house, even if I'm not feeling well, my parents are there, and Chloe won't make a surprise visit to my parents' house. It's close to my workplace and Chloe wouldn't barge in there. I called my mother right away, explaining about the pregnancy and Chloe, and decided to return home for a while. Brandon drove me to my parents' house, where they were overjoyed about my pregnancy. After greeting my parents, Brandon returned to our apartment. Being back at my parents' house, away from Chloe, brought me peace of mind. Soon after, morning sickness hit, and I spent days in bed. At work, my pale face raised concerns, and my boss suggested me to take a break, which I gratefully accepted. Many women at my job, including those who have undergone fertility treatments, understood my situation. Their support was comforting. Other than severe morning sickness, my pregnancy was uneventful, and the baby grew healthily. Feeling the first kicks was indescribably touching, and I lovingly caressed my belly every day. In fact, Brandon and I had already planned to move to a bigger house once we had a child. The reason is, our apartment was getting old, and while it's fine for just the two of us, it felt inconvenient for raising a child. We had set various criteria like proximity to stations, hospitals, and shopping facilities, and were searching accordingly. Then, Brandon suddenly sent me a photo. It was of a new high-rise condominium near the station. The area around the condo had everything needed for living, like commercial facilities and hospitals, and it was close to nurseries and schools, making it convenient for kids in the future. Completion is expected next month, and I casually entered a lottery for it. Surprisingly, we won. If you don't like it, we can just transfer it to someone else. Jessica, you can see it and decide. Hearing this, I immediately opened their website, was taken aback by the stylish design of the rooms, and exclaimed, "What?" The latest system kitchen, a bathroom with a sauna. Moreover, the unit we won was on the top floor of the 30-story building. The view from the window was amazing. I was a bit hesitant about the price, but Brandon works at a top-tier company, and with our salaries, we could afford it, so I decided to sign the contract for this condominium. Of course, I couldn't keep the purchase of a new high-rise condominium from my in-laws. I talked about it through Austin, my father-in-law. Austin said, "It's impressive that you young ones bought a condominium. If you need anything, I'm here to help." However, Chloe was not happy about this. When she found out we bought a high-rise condo, she was upset that we weren't living with her. Then, an incident happened. A week after moving in, Chloe suddenly visited. As usual, she went around the room complaining, but I entertained her with a smile. Then, suddenly, Chloe said she dropped her keys near the emergency stairs. What? Why did you drop your keys by the emergency stairs? Don't tell me you climbed all the way up here? I said, but apparently, she had dropped them while checking where the emergency stairs were, just in case. I went to the emergency stairs instead of Chloe to get the keys. At that moment, I'm taking this house. I was suddenly pushed from behind, lost my balance, and fell down the stairs. Ouch! Help, somebody! Unable to stand due to pain and shock, I suddenly felt warm water flowing around my feet. Realizing I had probably broken my water, I thought about calling an ambulance, but since I had hit my head hard, I lost consciousness. When I woke up, I was in a hospital bed. Brandon was there, looking worriedly at me. Jessica, are you okay? Brandon asked, visibly shaken, as I woke up. Where am I? What happened to me? I was still confused from just waking up and had a fuzzy consciousness from the head injury. When I touched my stomach, I felt something was off. My stomach, which was big until recently, had shrunk. Realizing this, I felt the blood drain from my face. Hey, why is my stomach like this? Where's my baby? Where did my baby go? I asked Brandon. Then Brandon quietly began to speak. The baby in your belly is. The moment I heard those words, I couldn't stop my tears and began crying out loud in the hospital room. Someone on the same floor found me, noticing the emergency staircase door left open. When they went to close it, they found me collapsed and hurriedly called an ambulance. Brandon asked why I approached the emergency stairs, so I explained everything about my interaction with Chloe. I was mentally harassed by Chloe when Brandon wasn't around before, which had once caused me to fall ill. Because of that, Brandon instructed me to always carry a voice recorder. Of course, I started recording the moment Chloe showed up unannounced. After listening to the voice recorder, it was clear that Chloe was the culprit. Brandon was furious to learn that his own mother had done such a thing. Then, a call came in on Brandon's mobile phone from a relative. On the call, Brandon heard a shocking fact. It seemed Chloe, thinking the baby had died, was telling relatives while crying. Oh, my poor sweet grandchild has gone to heaven. It's so sad. It's because Jessica, even though she's pregnant, went out riding a bicycle. She was making up absurd stories. However, Austin, who was present, had heard nothing like that from either me or Brandon and was looking at Chloe in utter disbelief. It seemed impossible that Austin didn't know anything about it. And the idea of a woman in her 9th month of pregnancy riding a bicycle. That's why the relative called Brandon. It was unbelievable. Then Brandon, taking the voice recorder, said, Jessica, let me borrow this for a bit. Can you leave the rest to me? He then left the hospital room. As Brandon left, my parents arrived. After I explained everything, they were both shocked and angry. I decided to trust Brandon and wait in the hospital room for the outcome. Meanwhile, Brandon met with the relative who had called him. It turned out Chloe was gathering relatives at her house, explaining the incident. Of course, her words were nonsense, and she was just trying to make herself look innocent. Some relatives believed Chloe and wept, while others were skeptical and viewed her with suspicion. Suddenly, Brandon burst in, causing Chloe to look at him in surprise. Huh? Brandon, why are you here? You were supposed to be with Jessica. She needs you. It's so sad about the baby. I was looking forward to its birth. Chloe said, even feigning tears. At that moment, something snapped in Brandon. Enough, Mom. I know everything. You pushed Jessica down the emergency stairs, he said, pulling out the voice recorder in front of the relatives. Everyone was shocked to hear the conversation recorded so vividly. Who heard the voice could not hide their surprise. Is this true? Austin, whose face turned pale due to the shock, asked Chloe. No, that's not true. This is nonsense. I didn't go near the emergency stairs. Even after hearing the recording, Chloe insisted she hadn't done it. However, there was a security camera nearby, and its footage would surely show me and Chloe entering the emergency stairwell. When Brandon mentioned this, Chloe, who had been speaking fluently until then, turned pale and began to tremble. "How awful! We're family, aren't we? How dare you shame your own mother like this?" Chloe clung to Brandon, insisting she was innocent and that it was Jessica who had slipped on her own. Even if that were true, leaving someone who had fallen and not helping them is questionable. However, the relatives who had already heard the voice recording did not believe Chloe's story. Instead, they urged her to go to the police and turn herself in. "It's not me. I'm not the bad one. You understand, don't you? You know I'm not the kind of person who would do this. Prove it in front of everyone." Chloe desperately appealed to Austin to affirm her innocence. But no one believed Chloe's story anymore. Soon, the police arrived, and from the audio and the subsequent security camera footage, it was clear that Chloe was the perpetrator. She was taken to the police station and arrested. The reason she did this was because the baby was a girl. Chloe had always been fixated on having a grandson, and when she found out the baby in the womb was a girl, she was disappointed. She thought that by pretending this baby never existed, she could try for a boy next time. When I heard this from the police, my head went blank with shock. Despite all that had happened, the baby grew healthily in an incubator and was discharged after 2 months. A few days after coming home from the hospital, Austin visited our apartment to apologize for the incident. He said that he and Chloe had divorced, that their house was sold, and he was going to move back to his family home. It was sad that the house where Brandon had grown up was gone, but since Austin wasn't to blame, we told him he was always welcome to visit. We regularly let Austin see his granddaughter after that. He adored his first grandchild and played with her with such kindness in his eyes. 3 years later, our second child, a boy, was born. Our daughter, now a big sister, couldn't wait to take care of her brother and was always by his side. Watching them was heartwarming, and every day was filled with happiness. But that happiness was disrupted by a visit from someone. The doorbell rang repeatedly, and when I checked the monitor, to my surprise, it was Chloe. I thought I would never see her again, and seeing her brought back memories of that day, making me feel nauseous. "What do you want now?" "I have no intention of seeing you again. Please leave," I said, but Chloe wouldn't listen. Apparently, Chloe had fallen ill, struggling daily with her health and finding it difficult to go to the hospital without a car. She had divorced Austin, and their house was now just an empty lot. She had no one else to turn to for help. Shockingly, Chloe knew I had given birth to a boy. She had apparently seen us in town, noticing Brandon holding our son. To Chloe, it was the long-desired grandson. She was determined to live with us and make the boy fond of her. "So you finally became a proper woman, giving birth to a boy. When you were pregnant with a girl, I was so disappointed in you. But now that you've had a boy, let's forget the past and live together, shall we?" For a moment, I doubted my own ears. Live together after all that? Impossible. What are you talking about? After what you did, living together is impossible. Leave now, or I'll call the police. Unfortunately, Brandon was at work at this crucial time. In distress, I immediately called Austin. He was supposed to visit the apartment today to see his son and daughter. With trembling hands, I called Austin. It turned out he was already near the apartment, so he hurried over. When Austin arrived, Chloe exclaimed in surprise. We couldn't argue in the entrance of the apartment building, as it would disturb others. But I had no intention of letting Chloe, whom we had cut ties with, into our apartment again. I gave Chloe an ultimatum, telling her I would call the police if she really didn't leave. Realizing her wish wouldn't be fulfilled, Chloe started to create a scene at the entrance and began arguing with Austin. Troubled, I contacted Brandon at work. After hearing the situation, Brandon called the police, and they soon arrived at our apartment. The police, understanding the situation, took Chloe away in a police car. As the commotion was in a conspicuous place, several residents of the apartment witnessed it. I felt sorry for causing inconvenience to many people. Later, after Brandon returned home, we discussed the situation with Austin and decided to move. As long as we lived here, Chloe would surely come back. We couldn't risk something happening to the children next time. Besides, Austin, though he said he had gone back to his family home, was living alone since his parents had passed away. Our daughter liked Austin and had previously expressed a desire to live with him. Austin is a kind person, and leaving him alone at his age worried us. When we proposed living together, Austin was very happy, despite everything that had happened. Afterwards, we bought a used property in the next town. Though it was second-hand, the house itself was very nice, and the surrounding environment was good too. Living in a high-rise was nice, but raising children in a place surrounded by nature seemed better. Right after moving, my daughter and Austin went to a mountain to hunt for beetles. Seeing them so happy made me feel that deciding to live together and choosing this place was the right decision. Once a month, we invite my parents over, and we all enjoy a home party, leading a happy life. Meanwhile, according to someone I was close with at the high-rise apartment, Chloe, undeterred, visited the high-rise again. But when told we had moved and she couldn't find out where, she left disappointed. If it weren't for what happened, Chloe might have been here, feeling the children's growth with us. Well, it's a natural consequence, but still. Later, I heard Chloe reluctantly returned to her hometown, rented a small apartment, and now lives a lonely life, working part-time in cleaning. My name is Olivia. I'm 35 and have been married to my husband Lucas for 7 years. We have a 5-year-old son, Thomas. Normally, it's just the three of us living a peaceful life, but I have one major grievance. It's the long vacations and Christmas when we go to Lucas's parents' house. Only his parents live there, but during the holidays, his sister and her family join us too. During these gatherings, which sometimes exceed 10 people, I'm expected to handle all the meal preparations. Because I'm married to the eldest son, everyone seems to think it's my duty. His sisters don't help me at all. On top of that, they leave their kids with me and go out to have fun. Even Lucas doesn't offer me any help, so as the holidays approach, I start to dread them. Just the thought of preparing meals at my in-laws is painful, not to mention the harassment I endure from Lucas's mother, Ava. From the beginning of our marriage, Ava has criticized everything I do. The first time we went to visit after getting married, she told me out of the blue, "Olivia, please prepare all the meals while you're here." I was shocked. It was my first time in their kitchen, and everything was thrown at me. In a panic, I checked the fridge, finding almost nothing. I had to start by shopping for groceries. "Do you want anything specific to eat?" I asked with a smile without showing my irritation. "Just make something delicious. Don't check with us every time, just get on with the cooking." Jackson, Lucas's father, seemed nice and calm, but I couldn't figure out what he really thought. Ava was always openly hostile towards me. Even when I casually asked Lucas about his parents' favorite dishes, "Anything's fine, don't worry too much about it," he always responds so casually. Lucas is originally unreliable, but since then, my distrust in him has only grown. In the end, I decided to make a safe choice and cook curry. As the smell of curry began to waft from the kitchen, Ava started her snide remarks. "Curry gives me heartburn. I'll have to take some antacid tonight." Without time to make anything else, I served the curry for dinner. Ava complained that the curry was too spicy, or that she preferred pork over beef. "Anyone can make a decent curry," she remarked, leaving the comment hanging in the air, yet she went for seconds. Meanwhile, Jackson ate without saying a word, but after he finished, he let out a deep sigh and left the room. While Ava's reactions are irritating, Jackson's sigh feels more condemning than her snide remarks. Dealing with just my in-laws' meals is stressful enough, but it gets even worse when Lucas's sisters and their families join. Harper's family consists of Lucas's sister Harper, her husband Ethan, and their daughter. Harper, in her appearance and manner of speaking, is frighteningly similar to Ava. Together, they hurl insults at me, making it feel like there are two Avas. When Harper comes to visit, she expects me to handle everything from cooking to making beds. Of course, she doesn't thank me, she takes it for granted. Ethan, usually quiet around his in-laws and Harper, becomes tyrannical when they're not around. "Go buy cigarettes," he'd demand, treating me more like a housemaid than family. Their daughter Emma, much like Harper, seems spiteful. Olivia, we're out of juice. Then Ethan would join in, ordering, Olivia, I'm out of beer. Bring some. Laughing foolishly, the two of them enjoy themselves. They are usually quiet in front of Harper, probably because they're used to being scolded by her. They seem to let loose when at the in-laws. For me, who ends up doing all the work, it's unbearable. Natalie's family includes Lucas's sister Natalie, her husband Mason, and their son. Compared to the insidious Ava and Harper, Natalie is brighter and easier to talk to. She always comes to chat while I'm preparing meals. While it's nice to be approached so casually, Natalie doesn't help at all. At first, I used to listen to her seriously, but if she's not going to help, she's just in the way. Eventually, when I responded non-committally to her chatter, "Are you even listening to me?" she'd snap. Busy with work, I had to listen to Natalie's endless, meaningless stories about her husband's complaints or her in-laws' snide remarks. I wanted to vent to Natalie too, but I couldn't dare speak ill of the in-laws. As soon as Natalie realizes I'm not fully engaged, she'd tattle to Ava and Harper. Then I'd get scolded by both Ava and Harper. Just because she's your sister-in-law doesn't mean you can ignore her. You should at least listen to her. Such a mean spirit, bullying your weaker sister. They'd freely insult me. I wanted to retort, "Who's the mean one here?" But I didn't have the courage. All I could do was endure the long vacations and Christmases. Even when I was pregnant, the treatment didn't change. I worked as usual the day after I gave birth. Ava would brag, expecting the same from me. I heard from Lucas that Ava had been badly harassed by her mother-in-law too. It seems she's intent on making me experience the same misery. I wish she would stop returning the ill treatment she received onto her daughter-in-law. Thomas was born in December, so that year, we didn't go to the in-laws for Christmas. "Why don't you go home alone?" I suggested to Lucas. He replied grumpily, "It's boring to go back by myself, so let's skip it this year." He informed me that year, the siblings didn't stay at the in-laws for Christmas as usual. They left immediately. Without me there, nobody could handle the meal preparations, so no one stayed overnight. But from the next vacation onwards, the hellish treatment at the in-laws returned. Now, I had to take care of Thomas while preparing meals and accommodations. When Thomas dirted his clothes and I had to do laundry at the in-laws, "Since we're letting you use the washing machine, do our laundry as well." They started making me wash their laundry too. Seeing this, the sisters-in-law began piling their laundry on me as well. I ended up folding Ava's and her sister's laundry. Completely turned into a housemaid, they even dumped childcare on me. "Looking after one or two kids is the same. Please take care of my son," they'd say before leaving the newborn with me and going out to have fun with Ava and the family. Only Jackson stayed home, pretending not to notice anything and watching TV. I was shocked when even Lucas left with Ava and the others. From that moment, my affection for Lucas began to cool off. As I was taking care of the two babies, one of them would inevitably start crying. Then Jackson would explode in anger. "The noise is so loud, I can't hear the TV. Finally got rid of the annoying bunch, and I can't even watch TV in peace." Jackson, usually quiet in front of Ava and her daughters, didn't hesitate to complain to me. I hated his silent pressure on regular days, but him yelling like this was just pathetic. The men in this house only act tough when the women aren't around, then badmouth them behind their backs, especially Mason, who is amusing to watch because of his drastic two-faced nature. In front of Ava and the sisters-in-law, he's all smiles, serving food and drinks diligently. But when the women are absent, he's swapping nasty comments about their wives with Ethan. Not caring about how it affects me, his wife, they freely talk trash. "Why do we have to come here every vacation and Christmas? I feel the same. It's nothing but torture for us husbands. Moreover, just between us, my marriage isn't going too well, so next time I might not be here," they'd say, laughing uproariously, whether they're joking or serious. They don't care that I'm listening, the conversation escalates. Honestly, my marriage isn't great either. My wife is too domineering, always looking down on me. They glanced around, and seeing it was just me, they began whispering. "My wife is just like her mother. Thinking about her getting even tougher with age is dreadful." Daughters do resemble their mothers, don't they? Recently, even her face is starting to look like her mother's, and it's creepy. Both of them were rolling on the floor, laughing at their own words. I began to wonder if Lucas also talked badly about me when I wasn't around. These two, laughing at such talk, would transform into entirely different people the moment Ava or the sisters-in-law appeared. They knew that if I told Ava or the sisters-in-law about their behavior, I would be the one accused of lying. That's why they felt free to speak ill of Ava and the sisters-in-law in front of me. Year by year, the workload dumped on me during the holidays at the in-laws grew heavier. Apart from meals, overnight arrangements, childcare, and laundry, now I was even tasked with picking up and dropping off Natalie's family. During a meal right before everyone was about to leave. "I'd like a beer, but I have to drive home, so maybe I should refrain," Mason mentioned. Hearing this, Ava chimed in. "From next time, let's have Olivia pick you up. That way, you can drink beer without any worries," she suggested to Mason. Mason, perhaps jokingly, agreed, but Ava took it seriously. "No, you don't need to go that far," he said. But cutting off his words, Ava commanded, "From now on, you will do the pickups." No one dared to object. In the car back home, even I, usually restrained, lashed out at Lucas. "I'm already cooking, arranging accommodations, taking care of the kids, and even doing everyone's laundry. Now I have to do pickups too." Lucas, taken aback by my anger, was at a loss for words. "Is there no limit to harassing your wife? How much more do they want to exploit me?" My anger was justified. The in-laws' house was in a snowy region, making Christmas visits challenging. Natalie's house was a 2-hour drive one way, but in heavy snow, it could take nearly double that time. I knew Ava would expect me to finish cooking and then go pick up Natalie's family. Exhausted and asked to drive in such conditions was absurd. I'm not accustomed to long drives, and surely Natalie's family would be terrified too. I was furious that Lucas, knowing this, didn't stand up to Ava. "I'm cutting ties with your family. I won't see Jackson, Ava, or your sisters ever again." I didn't want to see Ava or the sisters who did as they pleased. Hoping to calm my fury, he responded with a forced smile. "Totally fine. I'll let Mom and everyone know, so don't worry." When Lucas talks smoothly like this, he's usually just trying to appease the situation. But with his agreement, I finally felt freed from the in-laws' clutches. I marvel at my own patience over the past 7 years of marriage. That Christmas, I went on a trip with Thomas and my parents. It was the first time since Thomas was born that I spent Christmas with my parents. It's rare for us to be together for Christmas. Is it okay for Lucas to go back to his parents alone? Having shared my in-laws' harsh treatment with them, my parents were surprised by the trip. "It's okay. I have Lucas's permission, so he won't complain," I assured them, though I wasn't sure if Lucas had really talked to his parents. He had reluctantly agreed to cut ties with his family after my outburst, but I doubted his parents and sisters would accept it easily. They had been taking it easy so far, likely avoiding preparing meals themselves. However, they probably thought they could easily buy meals from the supermarket, so I assumed they weren't too worried. My parents, seeing their grandson Thomas after a long time, were overjoyed, and Thomas seemed to have fun too. When we visited the in-laws, I never had time to pay attention to Thomas, and I realized he must have felt lonely. Watching the three of them having fun, I completely forgot about the in-laws. Then, in the lobby of the luxurious hotel where we were relaxing, a familiar man walked in with a young woman on his arm. He resembled Mason, but he was supposed to be at the in-laws. The more I looked, the more he seemed familiar, and it appeared he noticed my stare. The man made a surprised face and quickly turned away. Likely because he was up to something shady. I pretended not to see and averted my gaze from the man. Just then, I received a call from Lucas. "Hello, what's up? Please, can you come to the family home right now? It's chaos here, nothing is prepared. Haven't we agreed that I wouldn't go anymore from this year?" I wasn't surprised, I had expected something like this. "I did mention it, but it seems the message didn't get across," he replied. I figured he hadn't really talked to his parents. I had already informed them that I wouldn't be able to pick up Natalie's family. Natalie had complained, but it seemed she had been pacified. Lucas was desperately trying to get me to come back. But I was more focused on the commotion and what sounded like Natalie's voice in the background. "Mason has run off with some woman. He said he was going to work, but when I called the office, they said he was off today. Hearing Natalie's words confirmed that the man I saw was indeed her husband. Mason is at the hotel we're staying at right now, I responded. Lucas was taken aback by the sudden shift in the conversation. What? My brother-in-law is there? I decided to tell the truth, thinking it would serve Natalie right for how she had treated me. Natalie must have heard Lucas's voice, as she snatched his mobile phone and started shouting at me. Mason is there! Where are you right now? Natalie screamed, almost rupturing my eardrums. Young and beautiful woman, high-class hotel. I replied. Next, Ava grabbed the phone and started yelling at me. How dare you go to a hotel on your own? You think that's acceptable? Even though they're shouting at me loudly, I can hear them. I've discussed this with Lucas. I have his permission to not associate with you anymore. I replied, deliberately provoking her. Ava started screaming something incomprehensible. Then Harper snatched the phone. We can't even have a meal without you. Please, somehow come back. Harper said, unusually polite, but I knew she only spoke like that when in trouble. In the background, Emma, Harper's ill-natured daughter, yelled, Olivia! Hurry up and prepare the meal! I couldn't help but laugh, realizing she was just echoing Harper's true feelings. The in-laws' house seemed to be in such a frenzy that I just hung up the phone. Since I had set my phone to reject calls, I didn't know what happened afterward until Lucas returned home. Seeing Lucas's reaction upon his return, I was prepared for the possibility of divorce. Worst case scenario, I was ready to make a life for Thomas and myself as an office worker. When Lucas returned from his parents' house, he apologized profoundly. I now understand how hard it's been for you all this time. I'm truly sorry. Lucas had been burdened with preparing the Christmas meal, doing everyone's laundry, and taking care of the kids, especially Natalie's child, throughout the holiday. Natalie, after hearing from me about the affair, had tracked Mason down to our hotel, apparently catching him in the act. Indeed, when we were leaving, the hotel staff seemed flustered, and there was talk of a quarreling couple. Perhaps that was her. Everyone had complained about Lucas's cooking, having never done it before, and, fed up with their nasty remarks. I'm cutting ties with this house too. I'm never coming back, he snapped. It seems Lucas has declared cutting ties as well. Hearing Lucas's declaration of disconnection, I felt relieved and confessed. If you hadn't decided to cut ties with your family, I was planning to divorce you. Smiling as I said this, Lucas began to cry and apologized again. I'm really sorry. Believing in his tears, I decided to keep striving together as a couple. From that year on, we decided to go on trips with my parents for Christmas. Both my parents and our family are delighted, and we intend to keep this tradition. Meanwhile, the in-laws' house doesn't seem to gather anyone anymore. Natalie and her husband divorced soon after. Natalie, having custody of the child, now had to work to support her life, leaving her with no long vacations or Christmases. Harper also realized that if the other siblings didn't return, she would have to prepare the meals herself, and didn't want to go through that hassle just to visit her parents' house. Left alone, the in-laws led a lonely life, unable to see their children or grandchildren. Ava, unable to harass anyone else, seemed to have turned her frustrations on Jackson, and I heard from Lucas that Jackson had left home. Lucas, deeply affected by the criticism of his cooking at the in-laws, has been cooking more often lately. Watching Lucas improve his cooking skills makes all that commotion feel like a distant memory.